and it's telling me that it's preparing to stream live. And last time when this happened,
Mine says it's already streaming.
it was already streaming. Exactly. So it's not
Okay.
streaming yet. But anyway, thank you for being here, Amy. Welcome
Yeah.
everybody to the second interview with the Imperfect English Club. Before I introduce you, Amy, I just want to do a quick intro of the Imperfect English Club. To stream live. And there we go. This is what happens. I need to cut down the volume on YouTube. Anyway, so welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. So the Imperfect English Club is about giving you foreign language learners, especially people learning English, a voice when you're using English. So many of you are not confident speaking English, are not comfortable because you're afraid that people will not understand you, that your speaking will not be clear. And I want to give you a place to practice so you can become more confident and more effective when you speak English. But the Imperfect English Club is also about giving people like Amy a voice, because Amy has a ton of knowledge, a ton of experience as an English teacher, but also as a learner of foreign languages. And so I want to give Amy a chance to tell us a little bit about what she knows. Real quick though, last week or 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Dr. Mary Janot and Lucy Waisova, one of her students, and we talked about communicative language teaching. If you haven't seen that interview, I encourage you to go back and watch that interview, because it will be the basis, the foundation for the conversation that we have today with Amy. So that was a lot of information. Thank you for being patient with me. Amy, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here too.
Of course. Amy, we met years ago when we were graduate students at Gonzaga, studying to become English language teachers. We also worked on our thesis together, which was so fun.
A lot of research hours side by side.
Yeah, spent together. Yes, that was great. So I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about your experience. I have 3 questions.
Okay.
So that you can introduce yourself a little bit, because you'll do a better job than I would. Why did you get into teaching English as a foreign language or as a second language?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to tell me all 3. Okay,
No,
I'm ready.
just one at a time.
One at a time. So I spent my childhood and my adolescence determined not to become a teacher. Everyone told me, you're going to be a teacher. And I said, there's no way I'm going to be a teacher. At university, I studied German and Spanish languages. Please don't ask me to speak in Spanish right now, but my German's still decent. Mm-hmm. And I went to Germany when I graduated. I graduated university. I went to Germany as an au pair, and I thought, hey, I want to learn English. I want to improve my German. So I went and became an au pair. And during that time, of course, I watched the children, but I also took intensive German language classes for advanced speakers. And I sat in that classroom and I looked at that teacher and I said, oh my gosh, it clicked. That's what I want to do. I want to teach English. And it took a little bit, came back from Germany, had a job for a couple of years, and then I moved to Spokane, got my master's at Gonzaga. And now, 7 years later, here I am.
Here you are. And now you have 7 years of teaching English as a second language under your belt. What would you say is your proudest accomplishment? We know you've taught little kids, adults, college students. You've trained English teachers in the US, abroad. You've got a ton of experience. What is your proudest accomplishment?
I definitely think my proudest accomplishment is my year in Azerbaijan, in Baku. That was a fellowship, an English language fellowship with the United States State Department. So I didn't work for them, but I worked in conjunction with them. And I worked really closely with my partners at the embassy. And we did teacher training around the country of Azerbaijan. And it was a wonderful experience to understand a culture. I had never been to Central Asia before, and just understand a culture that was an education culture that was so different from my own experience.
Yeah, definitely. That was an adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. What would you say, last question for your
Okay.
introduction, what would you say is your philosophy of teaching today, or some elements of your philosophy of teaching?
I would say that's such a good question. I would say I have a few things that I really try to encourage my students to do. And I teach right now. I am in what I love to do. I do, I teach university. Taught children, but adult language learners. So probably similar to your participants in Imperfect English Club are my passion. And one thing that I really encourage students to do is try to lower this. I like to do a little drawing. So there's there's your brain on one side. I'm going to draw it. There's a
Okay.
brain on one side, and then there's a really tall wall, and then there's your mouth on the other side. So here we go. I'm a really good drawer.
Okay, let's see it.
So here we have our brain on one side,
Beautiful.
and then our mouth on the other. And it's really hard to connect your brain to your mouth. I mean, they're right here, but there's this huge wall. And so in my courses and when I'm working with my students, I just am really trying to help students lower the wall. Because when we lower that wall, it goes a lot faster. So that's one thing that I want my students to understand is we have a lot of barriers. And those barriers are not only our vocabulary or our grammar knowledge, but it's all of our lives.
Our emotions, other people.
Exactly. Our personality, our environment, what else is going on? We're adults. We have a million things in our head. The second thing I like to make sure that adults understand is that children and adults can both learn language very effectively. But we see children tend to learn faster. And my philosophy is that there are two reasons that children might learn faster. One is related to this wall. Children have a lot fewer worries. We have, as adults, many, many things. Rent, electricity bills. Do we have dogs? Do we have kids? Do we have a job? All these things are impacting our ability to learn English because it's another thing in our brain. And the second thing that I like to tell my students is remember, when you talk to children, they have very simple thoughts. And simple thoughts need simple vocabulary. Simple thoughts need simple grammar. As adults, we have very complex thoughts, and complex thoughts need complex grammar and complex language. And without, I'm getting chills. Like it's so true. It's so true. So I want my students to understand, unfortunately, we cannot start with the complex language.
You have to start with the basics.
Our goal is to get there.
Yes.
I know you have more to tell me than I work every Monday.
Right.
I know you have more to tell me. You have more experiences to share with me. We'll get there. Unfortunately, we have to start with a little simpler language.
It takes time and patience to build those small building blocks to make something more complex. And also, and you talked about teaching children. One thing that we forget is children, even first language learners, right? Children whose first language is English, it takes them 3 years to start talking.
Exactly.
So that's a long time compared with.
And that's not writing. That's not grammatically correct. Exactly. That's not reading.
And it's the simple sentences that you're talking about. So it's difficult.
And not even sentences. They start with vocabulary, right? And then simple sentences with 2 words, sentences with 3 to 5 words. These are different stages of language acquisition that we can.
I lost my connection, I hope.
Okay, it seems okay to me.
I think I got you. Are you connected? Are you still okay? Sorry,
I'm still here. Okay. No problem. No problem. Right. It's taken a while to get across the Atlantic, I think.
Yes.
The connection. But when we look at children's acquisition, and I am not an expert in child language development and acquisition, but I do recognize that there is levels, right? We have 1 word, 2 words, 3 to 5 word sentences, and that takes time to develop.
Sure does.
And just like children, there are some children who by 2 they're speaking in sentences, and other children who are 4 before they're speaking in sentences, because their personalities are different and their environments are different.
And that is okay.
Their brains are different. Turns
Yeah.
out we're unique.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That was a really good introduction. Thank you, Amy, for all this. You're really interested in classroom culture and how it impacts learning. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. So actually, Dr. Mary Janot is the one who introduced me to James G. And he is G, I believe it's G. It could be Gee.
We'll call him and ask him.
We'll call him and ask him. We're good friends. No, I don't know him. And he has an idea of figured worlds. And when I did my research at Gonzaga, I was able to, with her support and with the support of our advisor, understand how that fit into my research. And what it came down to was this idea of classroom culture. So we have this phrase, figured worlds. What the heck? Okay, no, don't worry. It's not complicated. When we go into a classroom, now it's online is different, but when we go into a face-to-face classroom, there are things we expect. And I believe that in many countries, it's very similar to the United States. There are desks, maybe tables, and chairs for the students to sit in. They all face one direction. You face a whiteboard or a blackboard. The teacher is in the front, and he or she probably has a desk. These days, maybe a computer or a projector. This is the figured world of a classroom, but it goes beyond the physical part of a classroom. It goes into the expectations. So the students that that participated in my research study realized through their experience coming to the United States that the classroom environment, not physical, but the atmosphere was different.
Right.
In the United States, students can ask questions whenever they want. Students can question the textbook, the teacher. We value these experiences in the United States classroom, many United States classrooms. And they didn't experience that. In their experience, the teacher held all the wisdom, and the students, they listened at the end of class. If they had a question, maybe they could ask it. And it would be clarification only.
Yeah.
And so
we've all learned that this is what a classroom is, and we've all learned that this is how we learn. This is the only way to learn.
Right. I have to memorize exactly what the teacher says.
And the teacher is right.
And the teacher is always right. Yes. In my classrooms, my students are surprised when they ask a question and I say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know that answer. And this is actually a really important, I love when students ask questions I don't know.
Sure.
Because I too am human. I too am a learner. And so this is how I try to adjust and help students understand how that classroom culture, that figured world of a classroom can be adjusted.
Right.
Now, it's hard for students.
Yeah.
So there are some things I maintain. The students still look at the whiteboard.
Sure.
And I still draw on it.
Right.
Well, I'm a really good drawer. I write things on the board. I draw things on the board. And there are things I do that will help them understand this is a familiar learning environment while slowly introducing more things that make them uncomfortable.
Yeah. So you create that safe school space
Mhm.
that they feel they understand, but you don't give them all the things that they expect, because you don't want to keep them in their comfort zone, and you want to challenge them to go beyond and to ask questions and to do different things, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And this has become even more difficult with online learning. And I
Sure.
believe that the Imperfect English Club is a virtual club, correct?
Yes, all
Yeah.
virtual.
So as we've moved into this online space, it has been even more difficult to help students. Maybe not more difficult. It has created different obstacles
Yes.
to help students recognize this learning space.
Hmm.
And so one thing I do to help that is students have printed packets, right, of worksheets or
Right.
readings that are tactile
Right.
things.
Things that look familiar for them.
They look
Yeah.
familiar. Exactly.
Because one thing that's interesting is students who have always learned this grammar-based teaching only,
Hmm.
who have been taught to recite what the teacher told them, who have been
Hmm.
taught the teacher is always right, things like that. These students have a hard time recognizing other sorts of learning, other
Absolutely.
forms of learning, like group conversations or group activities, things like that, where they're not writing down in a textbook, they're having conversation, they're trying to solve a problem. They don't
Yeah,
necessarily realize that they're learning, so the online environment adds another layer there.
absolutely. And this is again um reminding ourselves that bringing in the familiar is not bad.
Right.
So offering my students grammar worksheets, isolated grammar worksheets is not bad.
Right.
But guess what? These worksheets, they're out of context.
Hmm.
If I look at all my textbooks I have, these are all English language textbooks. I
Okay.
find them valuable.
Sure.
They have a
A
space.
purpose. Mhm.
Yeah, but guess what? If you come to the United States and you have memorized a conversation with a grocery store clerk and you show up at the grocery store, that clerk, they didn't memorize that same
No,
conversation.
they're not going to have that conversation with you. They'll try to have another conversation.
Exactly. So we can utilize the isolated grammar worksheets to help students feel comfortable
Sure.
in this figured world of a classroom, in an online environment, in a communicative language learning setting, so
Hmm.
that when we show new ways of learning, when we show those problem solving techniques, which are some of the most valuable learning experiences,
Yeah.
we can
Draw
still
from
have
that.
this comfort space.
Yeah.
And not everything has to be new.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just want to add little new things as we move on. And this helps us, the problem solving, like you were talking about, the problem solving techniques in communicative language learning.
Hmm.
This is because language is creative. It
Sure.
is a creative
Right.
space.
Right.
And we see this with children and adult language learning.
And we can
Is
only be creative if we're just a little bit outside of our comfort zone. We can't be too far
Mhm.
outside of our comfort zone
Mm-mm.
or stay within our
Because
comfort zone.
the
It has to
wall
be.
is too high.
Yes.
if we are
Yes.
if we are in a brand new space, you come to the United States, you
Hmm.
are staying with me, and there's no French in my house. um,
Right.
and then I say, okay, and it's New Mexico, so it's very different than any place in France.
Right.
And then I say, okay, go get me some, hey, go to this store and get me some tamales,
Totally.
and go to that store and go get some red or green chili. Everything is new. And that
Yes.
wall, it gets higher and higher. We want to lower it, but it can also grow higher. And
And another
so,
thing that's
yeah.
actually really interesting that I hear a lot from people learning English. They say, "Well, the only way to learn is in an immersion."
Yeah.
Okay, but when you're in immersion, it's true. That's a really great way to learn a foreign language. However, when you're in an immersion situation, that barrier, that wall gets bigger also, because
Yes.
you don't know the grocery store. You don't recognize the food. You don't understand how it's organized. Like, why is the salt here and the sugar is here and the flour is here? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. That creates stress. You don't know
Oh
anybody.
yeah.
That creates
A
stress.
great
There's
example
so many
of this
things.
is I
Yeah.
took another French friend I have. I took her,
Yeah.
Valeska, I took her to the grocery store. And
Yeah.
for the first time she was visiting, she has lived in a lot of places and has traveled
Sure.
a lot of places. And she came
Yeah.
to the United States for a semester of college. And I took her to the grocery store and she looks at me and she goes, "Why do you have so many types of cookies?" And I said,
Or
she goes,
cereal.
"Which ones do you buy?" And I was like,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. She goes, "Why are there
Sure.
so many?" Right. And she had like quite English, but again, like it's an immersion is excellent for certain types of individuals. Coming back to that
Mhm.
idea of personality, coming back to the idea of
Yeah.
environment, right? She's coming in a semester in college. Her other stress levels are pretty low. She still has the
Mhm.
support of her parents financially.
Sure.
She still has
Sure.
these different things. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there are lots of really successful ways to learn English, and there are
Yeah.
ways that we can actually incorporate them into our daily life, which I
So
think is the
that's what I
last
want to
thing
ask
we
you
wanted
about
to talk
next.
about.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
perfect. So,
yeah,
so do you have any tips or ideas or specific things that you would recommend somebody learning English might do in their home country, maybe by
yeah,
themselves, maybe with other people?
yeah. So I have I'm sorry, I have 5
Oh
suggestions.
my, okay, let's hear it.
The first one is utilize what you already have. If you have grammar worksheets or textbooks, you
Mhm.
can feel free to utilize these to and as a teacher, I look at these as tools, not necessarily to improve dramatically, but instead I look at them as tools to when I'm feeling stuck, I can turn that brain from my
Yeah,
first language or my native language into English. This is what I
right,
tell my students.
right.
We need
It's a
to turn that
transition,
brain on. We have
right?
to turn it on.
Yeah.
It doesn't just appear. We have to work at it. So we can utilize some of these materials to turn our brain on.
Mhm.
We can also utilize these materials, especially if they are corrected, as a way for us to read out loud.
Yeah.
And read,
Sure.
oh, I guess I have 4 things because read out loud is on 2 of my lists. So the first
All right.
is turning your brain on with the
Uh-huh.
stuff you already own. These aren't bad. Turn your
Absolutely.
brain on, use them to turn your brain on. Then you can also utilize these. You can utilize news websites
Mhm.
and articles to read out loud. Now,
Mhm.
reading out loud is another skill that is um, uh, not one of the foundations of communicative language learning.
Sure.
But I find it very valuable because if we like, let's think about this. Our mouth is moving, our eyes are reading, and our ears are listening to this correct grammar.
Mhm.
And these 3, they work together
Mhm.
to help connect some things in our brain.
Mhm.
Now,
And we're noticing sometimes also like, "Ooh, I know this word, but actually now that I'm trying to say it, I don't actually know how to pronounce it." It's a
yeah,
good way to check, like, do I actually
yes.
can I say
Yeah,
this?
and so a good tool would be the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. This is designed specifically for language learners, but guess what? I use it too. And they have both British and American pronunciation, North American pronunciation for
Yeah.
every word.
I used a Cambridge online
Oh,
dictionary that
okay.
also. There's
Oh,
lots
good.
of online tools. Even just Google, lots of resources. There are no
Lots of
excuses.
resources for
You're stuck on
pronunciation.
a word, go find it.
Yeah, go find it. And so this reading out loud is another way for us to turn our brain on, another way for us to just be in the moment when we're
Yeah.
feeling like we aren't creative right now. It's hard
And
to
that's
be creative.
and that's okay. It's okay to have
Yes,
bad days
it's
and bad
okay.
moments. Yes.
Now, this is not reading out loud. No, reading out
Right.
loud is
There we
actually
go.
using your voice.
Yeah,
The oranges
absolutely.
were spoiled. I bought them yesterday. You must use your voice. You'll look a little silly. Do it in the
And that's
bathroom.
okay. It's all good. Nice.
The next thing, and this is so that one is about grammar. That one is about
That happens when
reading.
you're trying to do things live. You have a child interrupting you, and he's saying hi. All right, baby, you need to go and let Amy finish talking. No, not right now, honey. All right. Marwan, you cannot ask me anything right now. You need to leave. I will come and get you in 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Okay.
So, no problem. That is current life, right?
Oh, that's nice today.
Okay, so we have one grammar practice. We have one reading out loud and pronunciation practice. Mm-hmm. A good listening practice is podcasts and audiobooks. I can't stress this enough. In fact, do you know what I did to practice my German? I went onto Google, English Google, and in English, I typed in German podcasts about, and I happen to enjoy some true crime. And so I have that topic again in English. I Googled this.
And
it came up with a German language podcast on the topic that I was interested in. Yeah. And so I am able then to, for free, listen to these German language podcasts to just keep up my listening skills.
And if a podcast is a little bit too difficult for you, an audiobook might be good because you could have the actual book with you, either digitally or print, while listening. So you connect the two if it's a little bit too challenging. It's like subtitles for audio.
Yes. Another reason that I like audiobooks is when I use my audiobooks in German, I use books that I've already read in English. Sure. And this is really helpful because an audiobook keeps going. You can't stop it. You shouldn't be pausing. The goal is in a paragraph, you should be able to understand the topic of the paragraph when you're listening. And this helps us become more fluid and fluent listeners.
And be comfortable with not understanding every single word. That is okay. You don't have to understand every word to understand the story. That's a skill to practice also.
Oh, a huge skill and a very difficult skill to practice. Very, very difficult. Yes. And finally, yes. Oh my gosh, we want to be perfect. That's adult language. That's adults in general. When I teach my writing classes, they want to write perfectly the first time. And I'm like, but if you are a professional writer, you're a professional journalist, it's not your first draft that is published. Nope.
And other people are going to read it and edit it, even after you've done like 5 edits.
Yes, exactly. So finally, that's our that's our listening one. Finally, the speaking one. I love this speaking one. I tell students to do it. You might look a little crazy, but I call it narrate your life.
Yes, I do that too. I make people do it and I do it.
Yes. And so this is just going around your normal morning routine, your normal evening routine, and talking again. You have to use your voice. And the idea is not that you're learning new vocabulary. The idea, again, coming back to this wall, if we are practicing easy language, but again and again and again and again, that language will gradually become more difficult, and we will be using more complex language. We will start connecting our sentences. And so you're just talking out through your life. I want some water.
Right, exactly.
I drink water. I use my phone. I wear a necklace. I put on my glasses. The easy language.
Well, and one thing that we can notice also is a lot of times the textbook English that we've learned hasn't taught us how to say toothbrush and toothpaste and everyday and sponge and everyday things. Or maybe we learned them one time, but we don't remember. So it's a good way to check hey, this is something that I need to remember. And then you repeat it so many times that it becomes super easy and comfortable.
Yeah. Nice. So narrate your life, although you'll look a little crazy to anyone who lives with you, but that's okay.
I do it in the car and I look really crazy to people next to me and I am okay with it because
I have noticed.
Go
I've
ahead.
noticed that wearing the mask is really helpful because I talk to myself
In German?
in sometimes in German, sometimes in English, but at the grocery store, just like talking through my list.
Yeah.
But I have my mask on so no one can see.
That's really helpful. That's
Yeah.
really helpful. I love it. You need to stop that right now. I had good audience for you on this one.
Yeah. But I feel like we've really gone over our time, Sarah. So I
Yes, but you know
apologize.
what? But no worries. It's been really interesting. It's been really helpful. Is there anything you'd like to add today? Because you might have something else. If not, it's okay too.
I think that's kind of everything, but just keep trying and keep showing up. If you're having a bad week, show up and don't expect to learn anything, and that's okay.
Nice. Okay. I
But
feel like
still
it's
show up for yourself and and be gentle on yourself. Give yourself grace. Mhm.
it's like any habit that you build when you're trying to learn to play a musical instrument, when you're
Mhm.
trying to build an exercise habit, there's always going to be days when you don't want to and you're not good, and there's going to be days where you do great. You take advantage of both. There's learning in both.
Uh-huh. Exactly. Exactly.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy,
Of
for your time,
course. Thanks
for
for
joining us
having
today.
me.
This has been really fun. I'm going to end the live now. I really, really appreciate everybody who joined us today. Please subscribe to this page because that's going to help me that's going to help me in general. And you know where to find me otherwise. Thank you so much. And